everyone, welcome back to Nature Walks with Gabe. This is part 2 of my trip to Presqu'ile Provincial Park with my friend Kristen, and this episode features our very first ever Ephemeral Extravaganza! And now Kristen talks about spring ephemerals. Kristen, what does ephemeral mean?
So ephemeral is kind of means because they're temporary. So spring ephemerals are wildflowers that come out temporarily in the spring, and then once the trees leaf out, they kind of die back and they're not as visible. So this plant is, I guess, not a true spring ephemeral because it is around all year round, but it is one of the early plants that is out, so it's a cool one to look at.
All right, let's take a look.
So here we have Mayapples. So they get the name Mayapple because later in the season they will have apple-like fruit.
And what kind of habitat does this usually grow in?
Yeah, they get forested. So this area is almost probably a little too exposed for it.
Right.
So it's probably a remnant of the fact that there used to be more trees here. But what's cool about them is they come out in the spring. So they don't know what the temperature is going to be like. We might have some late frost. And so when they come out, their leaves are wrapped around the stem in order to kind of protect everything. So that if there is a frost, there's less chance that the plant is going to get killed by the frost because it's all tucked together to keep itself warm. And then as they get bigger, they'll unfurl and the leaves will come out and they'll kind of look like little umbrellas. And then underneath the umbrella, there'll be a white flower that comes out in May, which will eventually become the apple.
Cool. Can you eat them?
I believe you can eat the apples, but I think there's only a small window that you can eat them. So you really have to know your wildflowers because I believe other parts of this plant are quite toxic to humans. They're not good for you. So it is possible to eat the apples, but I would not recommend it because it's a risky thing. Like eating fungus. You better know what you're doing.
Yes. There you go. Mayaples. Probably don't eat them.
Probably.
Okay, we're now in the middle of the park. Yeah?
Yeah, give or take, yeah.
At Job's Woods Trail. We're gonna see what we can see. All right, what do we have here?
All right, so here we have Trout Lily. So this is one of your spring ephemerals. Comes up, it's one of the early ephemerals. So they get the name Trout Lily because they kind of look like the patterning of a trout.
They're speckled.
Yeah, speckled like a trout. And so it is a colonial species. So a lot of this is probably, it could all be the same plant or maybe two plants that have merged together. And so most of the time it comes up with just one leaf and it doesn't flower. So you can see these are just one leaf plants here. But then eventually when it's big enough and strong enough, it will grow two leaves and then it will flower. So here we can see, since it's a dark day, they haven't opened because they know there's no pollinators out today. So they keep them shut to protect the flower.
Sorry. They actually open and shut the flower. Day by day.
Yeah. So a lot of species will do that. Because again, remember in the spring you don't know what the conditions are going to be from day to day, so you need to protect your little flower. And so since these guys are so early, they can open and close the petals based on like sunlight, basically. So it's not sunny today, so they keep them shut. And so again, you want to protect yourself in case the frost comes.
Awesome. That's so cool. So how early will they come up?
Like the leaves are up fairly early. The flowers are just coming out, at least here in the Presqu'ile, they're just coming out in like the last week. Like I walked out here a few weeks ago and there was no flowers, and now there's a couple flowers. Interesting thing too is that these plants actually do better when they get disturbed. So they flower more when there's disturbance. So the problem when you're a colony like this is you just...
Am I helping?
So,
no?
For example, if a tree fell and divided this colony in half, and then they're more likely to flower when something splits up the colony. But when they're just living happily like this, that's why there's not very many flowers in this giant patch. We only got, 4 flowers in here?
Something like that, yeah.
So, yeah, because it's one big group, they don't flower as often. So when there's a disturbance, like a tree falls or maybe a deer or an animal walked through here and ripped up some plants, then that would cause more to flower. So sometimes people often like this plant in their gardens because it spreads out really nicely and it's a nice early spring plant. Mm-hmm. But sometimes if you don't disturb it, then you just end up with a bunch of leaves and no flowers.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Do we know what's the mechanism of that?
Yeah, I don't know, like, how the plant knows when it should flower and when it shouldn't. All these plants would be connected to each other through the root system, right? Their colonial root system. So maybe if certain number of plants are disturbed, they know that plants can show stress, right? They can communicate with each other. And if there's too much stress, it's like, oh, we better flower because we can't produce seeds if we don't flower, right?
Right.
They think they're dying, so you better get the seeds out there. So that
because our last chance.
Yeah, this is our last chance, right? So it could be something like that. I don't know. I'd have to look into it more. But
really cool.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Yeah. Trout Lily.
There you go.
There you go. True spring ephemeral.
Yep. All right, here's a spring ephemeral. It's not very pretty. So this is blue Cohosh, another one of your spring ephemerals here. So early season, it's very purpley blue, and then as it gets bigger, it'll go green. It does have flowers. This one's got a little bud on it, so it'll flower soon. Yeah, it's another one of those early spring plants. And later in the season, it doesn't look very striking, so people don't realize that it's anything. So a lot of these spring ephemerals, they flower now because there's less competition. So some of the trees might be in flower, but most of them aren't in flower yet. And so they can get all the pollinators' attention without competition. And then also once the leaves come in, it gets very dark down here. And so these kind of plants kind of just have to hang out. So you want to do your most taxing thing right now. And so producing flowers and seeds is the most taxing thing for a plant. And so if you're on the forest floor, if you want a chance, you have to do it early. It's interesting because it's very hard to see. So like I always know that this spot has some, but like because it doesn't stand out very much.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this one.
Yeah,
This is a new one for me.
Yeah.
Blue Cohosh.
All right, so we
What
have
you got?
another spring ephemeral here. Again, because it's a cloudy day, their flowers are also kind of closed up like the Trout Lily. So these are Hepatica. They have these cool leaves that are very unique shape. So it kind of like helps you recognize it. Although when they first come up, the leaves aren't always very obvious. But
Now this is one my mom taught me about when I was a kid, and she told me just like the lobes of the liver, there's 3 lobes in our livers, and that's why there's 3 leaves on the plant. So it's like Hepatica means liver, I guess, in Latin or Greek or something. There's a bunch around here.
yeah, there's a bunch in this little spot. Yeah.
That's
I always
cool.
find it interesting how like spring ephemerals can be very patchy. Like there's like nothing, and then all of a sudden it's like boom. Except Trout Lily. There's lots of Trout Lily.
They just go everywhere.
There's lots of Mayapple back in there too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
I know they're really good.
Wow.
The wrong way. But
That's amazing.
Trilliums take years before they flower for the first time. So that's the reason why you don't want to pick these things, is because it takes a long time for a plant to get big enough to have a nice big flower. That's a big flower. They only put one flower. So they put all of their effort into the one flower. Red trilliums are, I don't know if you've ever smelt a red trillium.
I don't know that I've smelled any Trillium, honestly.
All right. Well, these guys have been open for a few days now, so they may not smell, but these trilliums actually smell gross. They have a kind of a rotting smell to them.
What?
And that's because they are looking to get flies to pollinate them.
That's so cool. That's like a corpse flower.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
So that red flower is the color of meat, and then they stink. Like when it's been freshly comes out, it probably smells worse. I smelled it the other day, and I was like, well, it smells, but yeah. Kind of a mini version of a corpse flower. And that's why they bend downwards as well, because they're not looking to attract bees. So they're using scent. So you don't need to put your flowers up. You can just leave them like that, and then the flies will find you because they can follow the scent.
That is amazing. I did not know that. An additional interesting fact about red trilliums is that they're also called stinking Benjamins. So this is something that's in my head too. I mean, when I think ephemeral, I think typically I've actually thought annual, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, no, they actually take a few years. Like these are really big trilliums.
Well, yeah,
They're
I've never
probably-
seen,
yeah.
like the leaves on these ones are huge. Like
Yeah.
these ones, that's more typical of what I've seen
And then
before.
over here, there's some little ones.
Oh, sure, yeah,
And
yeah.
so these ones obviously are fresh. Like when this tree fell over, it probably brought up these seeds may have been in the ground for a long time. Tree fell over, and now the seeds they're like, oh, sunlight. Yeah, so these trilliums here are probably pretty old, those big ones. Yeah, so they come back year after year as long as conditions are right. So the flowers are useful to produce more trilliums, but what they really need is their leaves to get enough sunlight right now so they can concentrate all those sugars and they can store them down in their roots so that they can get through till next year.
Right.
I always think this part is interesting here because all these trees have fallen down, and you might be like, oh, well, like now it's sad the trees have fallen down, but it's disturbed the soil, and now you have all these little trilliums that have come up because there's
Oh yeah, there's a bunch all around.
And also, the other good thing about trees falling down, so our friends the white-tailed deer, they love a good trillium. And so, actually here at Presqu'ile, the best place to find trilliums is in areas that are messy like this, because the deer can't eat the trilliums in the messiness.
They struggle to
they can't get
crawl over all the stuff.
This is one of the best spots to find the red trillium. And I find at Presqu'ile anyways, the red trillium seems to be more abundant than the white trillium. Could be that the deer really like white trilliums. Maybe they don't like red trilliums as much because they stink. I'm not sure. That's just my
maybe
guess.
Yeah.
And red trilliums tend to flower a bit earlier than the white trilliums too. So I haven't seen any white trilliums in flower yet. But these guys, some of them are already pretty much done too, so they're finishing up.
That's so cool. I didn't know any of that. And that closely related species like that, the red and the white trillium, would have different strategies.
Yeah.
Is so cool.
Yeah, I guess it would be an interesting question as to why the red trillium went a different direction. It could just be that taking advantage of, flies are early as well, and so...
Yes, I've already seen quite a few.
Right? So you're in competition. Right? All of these spring ephemerals are in competition for the pollinators, right? They all have to convince the pollinators, come over here. There's also less pollinators out right now because a lot of things aren't out yet. So maybe it was something along the lines of evolution was like, well, if we attract flies, nobody else is attracting flies, right? I mean, down in the Carolinian zone, you'll have like skunk cabbage, which does the same thing, attracts flies.
Yep.
But here, anyways, the red trillium has the monopoly on the flies. So
very cool.
Instead of competing for bees and wasps, you just say, hey, I'll take the flies. So there you go.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing your knowledge and your passion for nature and all these things, and just good to see you again.
Yeah, it was a good little afternoon. I mean, weather didn't cooperate, but that's all right.
Yeah, even if it's raining, you can go and find joy and wonder wherever you are today. See you next time. Lord Jesus, thank you for this day, for this wonderful creation you've made. Good friends to share them with, and your care over all these things. Amen.